You're listening to the Soul Strategies podcast hosted by the team here at SoleStrategies. We hope you like the latest episode and thanks for tuning in.
I think we're live everywhere. Yep. Cool. All right. So thank you for coming and talking with us today.
Absolutely. Happy to.
You want to give the people a little insight into who you are?
Sure. I'm Jay Tomlinson. I'm the producer of the long-running Best of Left podcast, started in 2006 as a hobby and have been doing it ever since. So that's been my full-time gig for a long time now.
Yes. I saw that how you first got started, you used to listen to it while you were like at work and stuff, when you said you were a FedEx driver. That's how
Absolutely.
got into politics the same way. I used to just listen to it on my way to work, or like while I was at work, I would listen to like the Young Turks and a bunch of other like progressive news stations and stuff like that. And that's kind of how my interest got piqued as well.
Exactly. Yeah. And my show, it's a curation. So I just took the next step. Instead of getting involved in politics, I got involved in media by sharing all the best bits of all the great stuff I was listening to while driving around delivering packages. And it just seemed like a fun hobby to have, and went from there.
I love it. Did you ever consider running?
No, but I guess I feel the way a lot of people feel, that, oh, that's not for me, or I'd rather be in a support position, or I'd rather, do like a media position. You can kind of say whatever you want. And as a politician, you feel more constrained. And a few years after I started the show, I ended up living in DC and got in the nonprofit world. And I thought, oh, these are my people. I feel really comfortable being outside the house, throwing rocks and insults at the house, instead of being in the house trying to, make change in that way, but fully recognizing you need people on both sides.
Definitely. I feel the exact same way. I feel like the media has a big say in how politics is shaped and how people actually can make informed decisions and stuff. So it's important to have podcasts like yours, because it lays everything out and tells just the raw and honest truth. I was looking at the title of your last podcast when you were talking about the most like the needed, just blunt response to how like the pandemic response has been going. And I really like that, because you need that brutality sometimes. Like, you need to just lay it all out and be completely honest, so that people can really know what's actually going on in the world.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if I can move the Overton window a bit, then the politicians have a little bit more wiggle room to get some more progressive policies passed. So
definitely,
it all works together.
It does. Okay, let's get into these questions, shall we?
Sure.
All right. So we know that you've been into politics and interested in it since 2006. So what are some of the biggest differences between like progressivism in 2006 and then where we kind of are as a ideology today?
So the biggest turning point, I would actually put it, people might predict, I would say Bernie Sanders. What I think was the biggest turning point was the Citizen United ruling.
Yes.
And so in 2006, that hadn't happened yet. And you had to be pretty deep in the weeds to understand that money in politics was a major problem.
Definitely.
And after Citizens United, a lot more people started to figure that out. And that's, I think, what laid the groundwork for people like Bernie Sanders to be able to run on that messaging. So that was huge. And then the other big one is the climate movement. It just practically didn't exist as a national or international movement. It just wasn't really there in 2006. And it's completely blossomed into its own huge powerhouse of.
Yeah, it's just gotten to the point where we cannot ignore it anymore,
Of course.
So it forces people to really take a hard look, like with all the wildfires that are going on in like California, how Florida might not even exist in a few years. Like, it's things like that make you be like, I should probably pay more attention to this.
Yeah, when I was in DC and working in the nonprofit world, I was working at a climate change nonprofit, and the first event I ever attended was what they considered large, but was a relatively small event in a church, maybe a couple hundred people, featuring Bill McKibben, the founder of 350.org, but he hadn't founded 350.org yet. And it was like the seeds of what would become a massive movement. But at the time, we were just like over the moon that we could get 200 people to come to a church and listen to Bill talk,
Right.
and launch a campaign saying we need to focus on climate change. And so it's like amazing that, I mean, was it 5 years ago now that 400,000 people showed up in New York City, and this rolling series of international marches, like, and all the progress happening in Europe in particular right now, like it's amazing. It's amazing what's changed.
It is. Love that. Okay, so you are also podcasting before it was like the mainstream cool thing to do, because nowadays everybody has a podcast, but you were like one of the one of the pioneers of it. I remember you said on your website that you were podcasting before it was even on iTunes, which is crazy.
I listened to I was proud to say that I found podcasts and listened to them before they were integrated in iTunes. Yeah.
That means you were really in the trenches with it.
Exactly.
But how do you think podcasting has affected, political podcasting specifically has affected like the movement? Do you think it helps get the message along? What do you think about that?
Yeah, that's an interesting one. It's I feel simultaneously deep on the inside of that question, but also I observe, I do a lot of listening to podcasts, but it's really hard to know what it would be like to discover podcasting later. So for the first 5 years I had my show, at least to tell someone about the show was difficult because I first had to explain what a podcast was.
Right.
And so like, I have no idea what it's like to become aware of podcasting at the same time as other people are becoming aware of it, or to have this new way to engage with politics at the same time as it's sort of blossoming.
Yeah.
So, I frankly, I was a little surprised, like, after the 2016 election, there was this explosion of progressive podcasts, and I didn't see that coming. I didn't really realize what was going to happen. I didn't know if everyone was that people are going to gravitate to shows like that. And no, so frankly, it's been sort of hard to keep up with. Like, I don't necessarily feel like I have a really good grasp. Almost like you can't see a painting when you're standing 6 inches from it.
Right.
It's like I had that sort of sense, but generally I would say that it makes perfect sense that I've always thought that podcasts were amazing and that people should love them. And so it was sort of only a matter of time before they exploded and became mainstream. And that they became mainstream at the same time as media, more generally, that people were becoming aware of how everyone can find a media source to fit their personality perfectly.
Yes.
Podcasting fits that mold really well because there are so many of them. You can always find a podcast to fit your needs. So whether you're sort of mainstream, you will definitely be covered there. But if you want any gradient of, further out on the extremities, there is a podcast for you. So it I would say exacerbates that phenomenon of everyone dividing up and getting in their own tiny lane, and maybe not being aware of what the people slightly more progressive than them think, or the people slightly more moderate than them think. But that's the nature of the beast with all media, I guess. So,
Yeah.
I mean, I can only speak to my show and how I decide to do it. You know, I definitely try to put a message forward with my show, but at the same time, show a bit of a range.
Mhm.
You know, I may feature clips that are, you know, all the way over on the, like, you know, communist anarchist wing, and all the way into the, like, here's a mainstream clip that's just explaining what's happening, just, you know, because I think having that range is important.
Mm-hmm. Good. That actually leads me right into our next question. So that was a perfect little trickle into there. But before we get there, I like what you said about in 2016, that's when you saw progressive podcasts exploding, because I feel like that was a year that a lot of people really woke up and realized, like, oh my God, there's something going on in this country.
Yeah.
I know literally the day, I'm dramatic, but the day that like Donald Trump got elected, I remember I called my mom in the morning on my way to work and I was like boo-hoo crying, because I literally could not believe that it even happened. Like, I was like, Mom, like, what's going on? He's a terrible person, and like they voted for him. And she was like, Amani, this happens in this country. And I'm just like, are you like, what? But okay, this is coming from my mom, who was born in 1957, so she's seen some stuff, you know.
She had more experience than you did at the time, but
Definitely.
yeah, you got the wake up call.
For sure. And like I was getting woke-ish like in 2011, 2012.
Mm-hmm.
And then it like obviously exacerbated after everything happened. But that was a great point that you made.
Hey, you're listening to the SoleStrategies podcast. Take a moment to listen to some of our esteemed champions and their takeaways from the program.
And I'm glad that I was a part of that I had the opportunity to even be involved with that, with some legitimate organizations that help people who want to do right by other people, you know, by communities.
You know, utilize my resources, utilize my networks. This has, the last month, I've had some tremendous things happen.
It's your time to become a leader. Go to SoleStrategies.com to find out more.
So, in between the time that you started your podcast, we've seen platforms like Twitter raise to prominence on both left-wing and right-wing spaces. How much do you think social media has played a role in the political awareness happening right now?
So I think a lot, but this is another, like, I'm actually very much on the outside of this. I don't use social media. I hate it. and I'm an introvert. So the idea of being wildly social on the internet doesn't appeal to me and never has. And so as all the drawbacks, and drawbacks is putting it mildly when it comes to social media.
Yeah.
As those became clear, I just kept thanking my lucky stars that I never got into it. But I would come at this from a couple of different angles, the youth and the adults, because when I was a teenager, I certainly wasn't political and didn't really know anyone who was. And my impression of teenagers today is that they are much more aware of politics.
Yeah, they are.
But there could be multiple reasons for that, because I was a teenager at the end of the Clinton administration. So there wasn't an Iraq war to march and fight against. There wasn't, children in cages. I mean, there was a lot of reason to think things are going pretty okay and there's nothing to fight about. So that could be part of the reason why as a teenager I wasn't politically engaged. But if I was on social media where politics is talked about regularly, then maybe I would have been at that time. And as we know, one of the things about social media is that it thrives on outrage, and politics is outrageous.
Definitely.
So politics does well on social media. It drives outrage. Outrage drives politics to be more outrageous. And so we have this virtuous, I mean, I say facetiously, it's a very, very not virtuous cycle of social media feeding outrage, outrage feeding politics, politics becoming more outrageous, and then everything about politics being posted on social media. So we are living in an age where it's sort of impossible to get away from it. but we're also living in an age where it is genuinely important to be engaged in it. Whereas if you were growing up in the 90s, then there wasn't a lot of urgency, and now there is. So,
and it's not even that it just wasn't the urgency, it just wasn't being displayed as openly as it is now. Like, everybody has a camera on their phone, so things are being spread around much more quickly, and it's like hard to be silent about certain things when it's like right in your face, when you're looking at it immediately.
Yeah, no,
I think that also plays a role too.
Oh, no, of course. Which actually is a point I should emphasize, is that it felt like politics wasn't urgent. But so many of the problems that we're actually dealing with today existed then, but no one knew about it, or no one thought to care.
Yes, I totally agree. It's hard for people's agendas to really stay secret these days, because it's like you can Google everything. Like, I feel like for a long time we were all so used to like tokenism in politics. Like, here's this thing that looks like something good, but we don't really know what's going on behind the scenes. But nowadays I can actually Google and see, like, who are you getting your money from? Who are you being paid by? How did you vote? Like, I can look at your record and I can really see what's real and what's not. And now that we have that context, it's easier to be more active politically, because it's like, you're lying. Like, I know you're lying. I can see the truth. So that definitely plays a big role in it.
I'm still not sure that the politicians have fully caught up, but
I don't think so.
But the last 15 years, it's really seemed like they don't realize that videotape has gone mainstream
and exists.
Like, don't you know that we know what you've said, and you can't just lie about it the way you could 20 years ago?
Literally, I can Google and pull up a video of anything, and there's all the evidence in the world. But it's interesting, because I think there's just how they get away with certain things is just they play on people's level of political awareness. So there's people like you, like me, who like are constantly in the political news. Like, we're digging through, we're watching and seeing what's happening every single day. And then there are people who are living their lives completely outside of politics. They may see an advertisement here or there, or they might catch one random CNN clip. And it's easy for politicians to prey on people like that because they're not doing their research. So it's just interesting to see how everything, definitely social media and just the internet revolution as a whole, has played a role in how politically aware people are and how politicians can get away with this stuff. But not me.
it sounds kind of blissful, but yeah, once you're in, you can't unsee it, and you can't turn away. You can't turn away, even if you would like to.
Literally, it's like once you realize what's really going on, it's like, wow, I have to sit with this every day. And being a progressive, it's a lot of days where you're just so angry, because you're just like, why is the world like this? Like, and then you can look around and see other first world nations across the globe and see how they're handling certain things. And then you look at America and it's like, what are we doing? Like, it's just a lot, but hopefully we'll make some change in the near future. Yeah.
You may want to check it out. I did a whole episode on moving from anger through the stages to sort of some version of acceptance, and like, I even, I'm not a religious person, but the term grace came up, and I have found over the last decade that I've been getting less angry. Even as the world gets crazier, I've been getting less angry, because I've been understanding more deeply why people do what they do, and sort of understanding on a deeper level that no one thinks of themselves as the bad guy.
That's very true.
So if you can really internalize that those people doing horrible things and causing terrible damage and pain and suffering don't think they're doing that, then at least it can relieve some of that anger and frustration.
Yeah, there's actually a Jay-Z quote, random, but he says, die and be a hero, or live long enough to see yourself become a villain. It is like, it's kind of encapsulates that. It's like, we're all good guys until one day you look up and be like, wow, that wasn't right. But, but that's a dark way to think about it. But anywho, okay. So what do you see occurring in this Biden administration? What do you think any progressive policies are going to be passed? And if so, what do you think they should prioritize?
Yeah, I mean, that a lot has to do with what happens in Georgia. We all know that.
Mm-hmm.
And it depends on what you mean by progressive policies and priorities, because could we get some absolutely basic stuff through? Like, yeah, maybe. Do I think anything from my dream checklist is going to get done? No, not really.
What is your dream checklist? Sidebar.
Overturning Citizens United and banning money in politics. Massive Green New Deal that actually addresses climate change to scientific standards, which of course would incorporate massive social justice programs and, economic justice programs, sort of all encapsulated in that. Those would be my, sort of a universal overhaul of our democratic processes. Those would be, I don't know if I said 3 or 4, but those are the top ones. So
those are some good ones.
Yeah. So if the Democrats had the Senate, then could we get some basic democratic reforms through? So, some lowercase d democracy reforms through? Probably. Yeah. I mean, not uppercase D that supports the Democratic Party, just like, democracy itself. Get that through? Probably so. Biden seems to be positioning himself to prioritize climate change. That's always a tough fight. I'm happy to see it prioritized, and I'm happy to fight for the most we can possibly get from that.
It's interesting because the climate change agenda and getting money out of politics are kind of hand in hand, because a lot of politicians don't speak up on the climate change issue because they're, taking money from the oil and gas industries and things like that. So it's like, they kind of go together.
Well, I mean, this is one of the most frustrating things. When I was in the climate movement, I thought this is one of the most foundational issues we have, that everything else depends on solving climate change. And if you solve climate change the right way, it benefits a lot of other issues. And then you realize, well, why are we having so much trouble with this? Oh, it's money in politics. So then you feel like you got to step back and say, so maybe money in politics is the most important issue.
Right.
But if you take another step back, you realize, why do we have a problem with money in politics? Oh, the overwhelming power of capitalism in a highly unregulated system. So maybe capitalism and the total lack of regulation is our problem. And so you just keep taking step back after back. And then you realize, like, okay, we don't have time to abolish capitalism and implement all the regulations we need in order to get money out of politics so that we can finally address climate change. So I guess we have to do it all at the same time.
Yeah.
So good luck to us.
I know. I mean, wouldn't it be a great world?
Right.
It would be such a wonderful world. Okay. Yeah. All right. And I have one last question. So from your point of view, being on the internet in a left-wing position so long, what are some of the things that you think up and coming leftist politicians can utilize via podcast and the internet? What are some tips that you have to help them, like, engage with their community, build that kind of relationship to where they have a real support system online?
That is a tough one. And this is not my area of expertise, but it is definitely important to be able to reach everyone wherever they are. And so you are never going to reach me on social media, ever. But if I hear about you and find out you have a podcast, I will subscribe, because that is how I get my news. And so, every person you want to reach has their own little story about how they are reachable, what medium works for them. And so having a strategy that caters to everyone and the key, I would say, based on running a show, that the strategy that people use is create content that can be used across multiple platforms. It has to be transformed and sort of customized to a specific platform. You know, a podcast can easily be an hour long, but it's always good to, you know, make sure to clip out a minute long segment that can fit on Twitter, that sort of thing. And so creating content with the foresight to be able to split it up and turn it into a newsletter or a blog post or a, you know, YouTube video and podcast that can also be cut up into, you know, Twitter and Facebook video. Like when you create content that is reaching out to your community, when you know what you're going to do with it, then that helps guide the creation process.
That is absolutely necessary.
Yeah.
Yes, I do digital media for a lot of candidates and just a lot of different companies in general. And that's one of the biggest helps, is having like some type of content bank or like a content farming type of process, to where you can just dig through a lot of stuff and share it all over the place. So that's really, really great foresight. All right. Any other last words for our audience here? Anything you want to promote or get out?
No, I don't think so. I think we covered a lot.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for joining us today. It was really good talking to you and hearing more about your background and your experience and your ideas. So we hope to have you on here again soon.
Great. No, thank you. And thanks for the work you guys are doing. You know, supporting candidates, not taking corporate money, is doing the Lord's work right now.
Thank you. We think so too.
Yeah.
Thank you. All right. Well, you heard it here, guys. We will catch y'all on the next episode. Thanks, Jay.
Thank you. Bye.
All right. Bye.